Welcome into the Monday Smash right here on Warchant TV. He is Irish O'Fell, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, and tonight's program, as always, is presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis in a Tallahassee capital city that was destroyed by a thunderstorm for the better part of an hour and a half, 2 hours. Ira, did you get much of it up by you?
I was actually out at the time, and I got it twice. Like I was in an area that we got hammered, and then I'd sit in my car for a little while, and then it left, and I went in the store, and I came out, and it was back. Like it was not just like one thing that passed through. It was intense, man. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, I grew up in Clearwater and Palm Harbor, and Pinellas County folks would be impressed with what just happened for the better part of an hour and a half today. That was pretty cool. But now we have made it. The sun is back out, setting here in Tallahassee on a Monday night. But we've got a lot of stuff coming up for you here in the realm of Florida State football, college football in general, recruiting updates, wraps. Florida State lands a commitment today. You got a 3-star defensive lineman with a nickname Tank. You know, Florida State has a pretty good track record, Ira, of a defensive lineman with the name Tank. Hopefully this can be Carradine's successor because James Carrington said yes to Florida State today. We'll talk about that with Michael Langston a little bit later. But looks like, all right, just a little bit of a pulse here for Florida State on the trail. They're getting some yeses, Ira. How about that?
Yeah, and, the Steve Wilfong from On3 had a couple more RPM picks for Florida State over the weekend. The big one being Chauncey Kennan, pretty elite. I think he's one of the top 5 cornerbacks in the country, also one of the top 5 players in the state of Florida, big time prospect that was visiting this weekend as well. And he got the crystal ball. So, or not the crystal ball. What do? We do RPM picks is what we do.
Yeah, so we call it.
He used to do crystal balls. Now he does RPM picks.
Yeah, the JCS, we call it the RPM ball market. Because everybody's got to have their shtick as to what it is. We could call it the smash button. We're smashing the button for Chauncey Kennan.
But yeah, that's a good one. And then and we'll see when that officially pops. But usually it's not too long after the pick is made, and there was another one as well. And I don't know what they're going to come out of this summer with. The summer now is the big recruiting heavy time, and you want to come out of the summer. You'd love to be in a top 10 recruiting class, then try to hold on for dear life and actually get a top 10 class from Mike Norvell. But realistically, probably not going to happen. We'll see. But they've got a couple more big weekends, and like you said, at least there's some positive news.
Well, maybe it's one of those deals that last year, if they played reasonably well on the football field, Ira, they would have been top 10. And maybe this is a year where you surprise, you play a little bit better than maybe you expected, and you might be able to close strong. Florida State did certainly send the bags, as the kids used to say, in order to get some late flips in the 2025 cycle. And they've got a big-time quarterback on campus as well. So stay tuned to warchant.com for all that information, play-by-play, essentially, of Jaden O'Neal's visit to Florida State. He is on campus. We'll talk with Michael a little bit later about that. But we got to get to the big topics in college football as well as we start tonight on the Monday Smash. We'll get to Florida State in just a little bit. But the House settlement and what that means for day-to-day ops for the football program. I mean, the ramifications of the House settlement being approved, Ira, are now going into effect. Technically speaking, by the letter of the law, if you had a third-party deal that you needed to report it 10 days ago, June 6th, I believe, was when the players needed to start reporting to the NIL clearinghouse, NIL Go, if they have a deal that is over $600, which is like all of the deals are over $600. And obviously the athletic department itself has to get ready to fund all sports under a new salary cap of about $20.5 million. What have you learned in the last week about, theory to application of what's going on in the post-House settlement world?
Yeah, I think what's interesting from a big picture standpoint is, we've all been discussing this for the last 6 months since the House settlement looked like it was going to happen is, okay, so they're going to have this idea of a $20.5 million salary cap for all the sports. And that's going to really rein in the excess pay for play stuff that's been going on for the last couple of years. And the question was, can they really enforce it? Can they not? I thought it was interesting. Michael Alford, FSU's athletic director, has been one of the biggest cheerleaders for it. He's been saying all along that he believes it's going to work well. It's going to be a strong salary cap. It's going to level the playing field. And then when he spoke to the Board of Trustees last week, and we have a story up on the website at warchant.com, people can go back and read it if they haven't read it yet. And he basically was like, I'm still excited about this, but I'm kind of skeptical. about the enforcement. Well, that's, a little bit of an about face from where he was previously. I think it's where a lot of people have been. And then just this week, again, the House settlement has been approved now. It's full steam ahead to this new world. As you said, the clearinghouse is already open. In fact, Michael Alford said they've already had some players submit deals that have been rejected as being not in line with the new guidelines. But just reading quotes this week, today, from athletic directors around the country who are still basically saying they do not know how this is going to be enforced. And it is, as you said, it's really incumbent upon the school to report the money. The question a lot of people have is if a booster or some third party goes to an athlete and gives him money and doesn't report it, and the university doesn't know about it, or the coaches ostensibly don't know about it, and you go back to the old way, then are you going to be able to punish the school? So it's a lot of gray area, man. There's a lot of questions. We are going to find out more, I think, this week about how FSU's funding that $20.5 million. But it's as much as this thing was built up as kind of like the saving grace of the model, you're still hearing more and more people express concerns about whether or not it's really going to work in terms of enforcement.
Yeah, in terms of where the money comes from, I'm looking forward to hearing about that in a minute because it's how the sausage is made. Again, a judge somewhere says yes to something, but then that means that you have to do something yourself. I suppose you could say how the sausage is paid out. But are we in a place, Ira, where, you think back to Florida State's academic issues under the Bobby Bowden program, and getting stripped of wins and schollies and so forth. And the lesson it was said in those days was, don't self-report, don't raise your hand, don't tell on yourself. Is that where we are with NIL Go, which is the clearinghouse that kids have to report? Or do you think that maybe off the record coaches are saying to kids and collectives and boosters, I don't want to know nothing about nothing. You don't tell me anything and you all just do what you do. Is it that simple in this moment? Or do you think people are going to try to play by the rules and see how it goes?
Yeah, that's the problem is I don't think anybody knows. If you go back to when NIL became a thing, 4 years ago or so, when it was finally legalized, the players can make money from their name, image, and likeness, which was something we all thought the NCAA should have done a long time ago. And they finally did it. But at that time, nobody knew how it was going to work out. And Florida State, quite honestly, was kind of flat-footed. They were not one of the initial ones that went in and did pay for play, which is what everybody else was doing. And so Florida State kind of got into that late. Then they ended up, obviously in 2022, 2023, those teams, there were a lot of guys making plenty of money through NIL and through the collective, the Battle's End. And they actually greenlit it to where these collectives now could be marketed by the school and promoted by the school. Mike Norvell did ads for the Battle's End and Rising Spear. And so they were really connected. The question now is, do they go kind of back into hiding, or do they become part of the university? Like, that's one of the big questions, is schools have to decide whether or not they want to bring their collectives in-house or leave them out of house and then have some, plausible deniability. Again, every school's got to make their own decision, but the problem is nobody really knows what anybody else is going to do. So you could go into it thinking, okay, we're going to have this plan, everybody's going to act above board. But then if half the schools aren't and nothing's happening to those schools, well, now everybody has to do it. So, man, it's just amazing to me that the season's starting in a couple months and nobody really seems to have a firm grasp of how it's going to operate.
I wonder what went into that, because I recall the booster call. This is a booster Zoom months and months ago, maybe during the season, maybe before the season. And Michael Alford speaking about the $20.5 million cap. And then, it's just going to be a hard cap, like it's the pros, like it's the pro game, and that's going to be that. And if there's any trouble, Deloitte's got him. Deloitte's going to go get him, and they're going to enforce this thing. I wonder, we heard as recently as a couple of weeks ago, you're reporting from the ACC meetings that Deloitte made an excellent presentation before university officials, athletic directors, coaches, and so forth, that they were impressed with what they saw. Was there, were they sent something else in the last couple of weeks that spooked them, or were they just trying to put on a brave face because they wanted the House settlement to get pushed through, and now they're more willing to, athletic directors and personnel are willing to speak more about that? we don't know how this is actually going to work.
No, I think it's reality kind of hit him in the face. I think as these coaches are going out, listen, these coaches are constantly recruiting. It's not just football. We write about football recruiting all the time. That's where our focus is. But there's baseball, there's NIL in baseball, there's NIL in men's basketball, obviously women's basketball, softball. So in all these sports, these coaches, these recruits, that Florida State's recruiting, a lot of these recruits, what they do when they come on visits is they'll say, hey, this school's offering me this school's offering me that. And so these FSU coaches are hearing these numbers that are out there. And so they're saying, well, wait a minute. I don't understand how that school can offer you this, this, and this, because in the new salary cap, so much of their money is going to be devoted to football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball. How are they going to have $700,000 for golf or whatever it is? And so what Michael Alford said is basically he's said to those coaches, well, those schools can't do that. They can't be offering as much, or it might be a football player who's saying a school in the new model is going to be offering him $1 million or $1.5 million. That's going to be too big of a chunk of the overall salary cap for those deals to be like they have been the last few years. For example, Carson Beck to Miami for $4 million. That does not work in this new model. It can't work. So now his deal was done ahead of time, so I think it's grandfathered in. But any new deal, so they're getting feedback from these athletes about what other schools are offering them, and the coaches are going to Alford and saying, hey, this is what these other schools are offering. And now, okay, you've got a problem. So Michael Alford said, he's been talking to the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, about maybe there's schools in the ACC who are maybe making some of these offers. So yeah, man, it's the real world. I think they had hopes that things will be reined in, and maybe they will. Again, a lot of it's going to come down to what kind of enforcement there is and what the penalties are. But he definitely was singing a slightly different tune than he was earlier.
Yeah, welcome to the party, pal. And that's where, to me, it looks like, just looking at the calendar, I know that you're always recruiting a year ahead, but, for football, most everybody has the money that they're going to get this year. And then, national reporting is that next year's when they're going to feel the squeeze, if there actually is a squeeze to be felt. But it seems like a sport like baseball, for example, would be a truth teller, truth serum as to, how much schools are going to play by the rules. Because imagine, Ira, if LSU, for example, had like a $5 million baseball budget or a $4 million. So you're telling me that 5 out of your 20 is going solely to baseball? That doesn't seem like it adds up.
Yeah, exactly. And some schools have come public with how they're going to break down that money. Some schools, I just saw actually today, Georgia is going to go 75% to football, 15 to men's basketball, 5 to women's basketball, and then everything else is going to split 5%. That means baseball is in that 5%. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Other schools are not saying what they're going to do. They don't want to give up the competitive advantage of letting other people know how they're going to allocate their money. Michael Alford, Florida State, have not said how they're going to allocate their money. So it's, there's going to be some gray area, but that's exactly right. I mean, the idea is the most revenue sports are where schools are going to be putting most of their money. And the only sports that make money for the vast majority of college athletic programs are football, then men's basketball, sometimes baseball. In the Southeast, particularly, some of the baseball teams will turn a profit, but a lot of them don't. And in most schools, it's just football and men's basketball. So that's where most of the money is going to go, because that's where you get a return on investment.
You've covered this game for a long time, Ira. How often do you just stop yourself and, if you're writing something, or, not even on the clock, you just see something come up and you go, what the hell is this? Like, how do you make sense of it? I've been covering this for 15 years. You've been around longer covering the game than that. This has to be just like something out of a bad dream to you, I would imagine.
To a degree, but I do hope that there's some sort of, something to get the competitive balance in order. Because as far as, players making money, I got no problem with that, even if it's big money. Because again, we talked about when Jordan Travis was here after the 2022 season and the way he finished that year, and then the way he played in the bowl game against Oklahoma, passed for over 400 yards. And he was so vital to that team, and he was why so many guys wanted to stay. Jared Verse, Trey. There were questions about whether those guys were going to come back in 2023, and they all ran it back famously because they thought they could chase a national title. And Jordan Travis, to me, was the linchpin. Like, once he said he was staying, it was it. The first time I heard that Jordan was going to go over $1 million, I was like, you got to be kidding me. There's no way. That's not true. There's no way. And I don't think it was a whole lot more than $1 million, but I think it was over $1 million. And the person I was talking to was like, yeah, man, that's a bargain. In fact, other schools are offering him $2 million or more. He's going to take a lot less than that to stay at Florida State. And you think about it and you're like, well, shoot. Yeah, man. Yeah, it does make sense. He's a sure thing. Now, what they're doing with these high school kids and bidding crazy amounts on kids that have not done anything in college. And we all know that no matter how highly rated a kid is coming out of high school, it's all a crapshoot when it comes to whether or not they'll be college stars. But when somebody's a bona fide college star and he's already at your school, I think it makes perfect sense. So the part I do think it's going to be normalized. If there is some guardrails, I was thinking about this earlier today, actually, that I do think I'm looking forward to a time when the numbers are concrete, if they ever are. Now, if they're not, if it just stays gray forever and it's murky and people are operating in different systems and there's no competitive balance, then yeah, man, that's gonna be pretty miserable. But if there is some sort of competitive balance and inequality and what people are spending, no matter what the numbers are, I look forward to that, and I'm hoping that that's where we go.
Yeah, it reminds me. You ever see the movie Quiz Show from way back in the day? Yeah, Scorsese has a cameo in it, and he's talking to the investigator, and he's like, "Well, people don't watch the contestants; they watch the money. They want to see where the money goes." Anytime somebody's signed in free agency in professional sports, you want to know how many years, in the NFL specifically, what's guaranteed over how many years, and what's the total count. I mean, if you could ever get to a world in college football where you just know what the kid makes or what the young adult makes, the adult, 21-year-old, now that they're on their third year and then they just had a breakout sophomore season, I think this becomes a hell of a lot easier. But we're going on 3 and we're looking at their NIL valuation out of the portal or out of high school. And who knows? I mean, some of that could be dead on and some of it could not be. But in all other sports, Ira, especially ones that have salary caps, I'm a big hockey fan. Okay, I know exactly to the dime how my team stands, every offseason. Then there's just no knowledge on that level when it comes to college.
And that becomes in the NFL, and I'm not as big an NFL fan, obviously, as you are, but like that becomes like the game inside the game is that everybody wants to be a capologist and trying to figure out. And when there's a trade made or a signing made and people are like, you have the debates about whether or not it was worth it. Do we invest too much there? That can be fun. I could see that happening in college football. I really could. Now it's going to continue to change the dynamics of the sport in terms of the way the athletes are treated. They're not going to be treated like amateurs anymore. That's already started to happen, but it's going to be more and more evident as these numbers become more transparent. But I agree with you. I think if there is some transparency on that side of it, I really think now there also could be more accountability from the management side. And so a coach isn't just a play caller, whether it's him or his GM. And now you get the side of, okay, well, why'd you spend this much money on your DBs and your, linebackers are terrible. There will be that type of part of it. And I think eventually we'll get there if we can get some transparency.
One thing that Florida State needs to be able to, and all athletic departments need to be able to pull this off is cash on hand. And that's something that we discussed off the air about where does that money come from? Because it's $20.5 million. In my head for the longest time before we got here, Ira, I was thinking, that 20.5, maybe it's the disbursement check that comes from the league in terms of the television revenue. That's where they can put it in a bank account and then start to disperse it to other bank accounts. But I'm sure they pay players more frequently than once a year, and it can't just be a lump sum of cash that comes in. So what is your understanding about how Florida State is going to be able to get the 20.5 that they can break up over several payments across the year for all the athletes that they want to put under this cap?
Yeah, and just to clarify some confusion, because some people have thought that the $20.5 million is actually coming from the NCAA. It is not. With the NCAA money, their $2 billion settlement or whatever is actually going to the players in the past. So as far as the money for players in 2025 and 2026, the schools have to come up with that money. Now, it does ostensibly come out of the TV contract, but they've been spending that money all along. Like that's part of their annual disbursement. FSU, as part of the ACC, as part of that TV contract, gets about $40 million a year, somewhere in that ballpark. So, but they already spend that $20.5 million on other stuff, just operating the athletics department, coaches' salaries and everything else. So Michael Alford really started talking within the last year about whenever this goes into effect, we're going to have to cut from our budget. And they've done some things to tighten their budget to come up with some of that money, but then also figure out new revenue streams. Well, we just found out at that Board of Trustees meeting and some reporting since then that FSU is actually, it looks like a lot of the state schools in Florida are pushing the Board of Governors in the state who oversee all the universities to allow state universities to give money back to athletics. And I believe it's going to be a loan. I believe they're going to loan the athletics. They can loan the athletics departments enough money that they need to make these NIL payments, not NIL, this revenue sharing payments over the next couple of years. And then the schools have to pay the money back. And that's my understanding right now. And so I think what you're seeing for Florida State's case is when they got the new settlement, and I know it's confusing, but when they got the new settlement from their lawsuit against the ACC, that's going into effect now, but they're not going to see that money right away. And that could bring in an extra $18 to $20 million a year for Florida State based on their television ratings. So in the past, where Florida State was getting $40 million a year, in the future, they could be getting closer to $60 million a year from the ACC because they settled their lawsuit. Well, you don't have that money in hand right now, as you just said, and they need to next month start ostensibly paying out these new NIL deals, these revenue sharing deals. So if this gets green lit, and I think the Board of Governors meeting is on Wednesday, they're going to allow universities to give money back to athletics. And it's not just Florida State, it's all the public schools in the state of Florida. Right now, they're not allowed to give money to athletics, but this would clear the way for them to do that. Then as those checks come in from the ACC down the road, they'll be able to pay that back. And then also, obviously, if Florida State ever gets out of this conference and gets to a bigger conference where they're getting even bigger paydays, then that won't be as much of a concern.
Well, yeah, and you're right. This is a very confusing time for us as Florida State fans because of the ACC litigation. So, you know, we know more than we ever want to know about a Board of Trustees meeting in Florida State. We know more than we ever wanted to know about the circuit court in Leon County or the Florida Appeals Court or this court or that court. But this, what you're speaking of, is not Florida State Board of Trustees. It is the state of Florida, the entire state Board of Governors, which has dignitaries from all universities, like you're saying, public universities. I remember watching one of the hearings because I think we had a day where somebody had to watch the court and somebody had to watch the Board of Governors. But this is like where Chair Collins, Michael Alford, and President McCullough sit down in a room with their counterparts from USF and UF and UCF and other schools in the state, along with other board members, right, in order to allow for rules for universities throughout the state to, in this case, move money around, and it becomes okay, not just for Florida State in this move, but it'll be okay for the Gators and it'll be okay for the Knights and the Bulls, correct?
Yeah, and the thing here is we've been talking about this forever, and we've talked about it as if there's a state law that prohibits universities from giving money to athletics. It's not exactly right. It's a policy from the Board of Governors. It's something they put in because they didn't want universities to just siphon money to athletics while the university academic side was struggling. So the reason we watched that Board of Governors meeting a few months ago was because this was kind of the first step of this. Peter Collins, as you said, and some other people were pushing for them to loosen those guidelines and not take money from like tuition, not take money from the university that's going to academics necessarily, but it's money in auxiliary accounts for like parking fines, different things, concessions, things that the university collects. They have money, it's excess money for them. Can they move some of that over to athletics that's what they're doing right now, is in the short term for the next couple of years until they get to where they can build a budget. So I think the plan originally was they were just going to try to have some cutbacks, cut funding wherever they could, expenses, and then try to raise some extra money. I think at some point they decided to go this route as a stopgap over these next couple of years till that money really starts rolling in from the new revenue sharing from the television deal with the ACC.
We have all gotten so much smarter and so much dumber, I think, over the last few years in college sports. It has been an insane ride, and we're not done. We're nowhere near done. There are going to be courses taught on what the hell happened in college sports as it relates to sports media and sports business for decades to come, Ira, after this is all over. We're going to get to something a little bit simpler and more fun in just a minute. That's the top 40 list, which has just been released on warchant.com. We're going to discuss that a little bit. Yes, we're going to have formal breakouts and discussions of the top 40. But one more thing that you can, we're trying to make things simpler for you out there. Well, Russ Voorhis makes the insurance process very, very simple for you. And if you live in the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, or Alabama, he's got you covered, Ira. He's a Nole through and through and somebody who understands the insurance game, and he's powered by State Farm to help folks in those 3 states.
Yeah, Russ is a great guy. We've known him for a long time. Huge FSU fan, big supporter of Warchant. That's kind of how we first got to know him. I think he got to know Gene through Warchant.com. That's how I got to know him as well. And, has the insurance company over there in Jacksonville. So at one point he reached out and was like, hey, what do I need to do to sign up and reach out to other Noles to offer my services? And so we've been doing that for the last couple of years. Thrilled to have him on board. Really good guy, huge Nole, figuratively and literally, big dude, and loves the Noles. He's got 2 offices over there in the Jacksonville area. We know there's tons of FSU fans in the Jacksonville area, up into Southeast Georgia as well. And you can come to his brick and mortar offices there in Jacksonville Beach and in Orange Park, or call the phone numbers or go to the website, russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. All your insurance needs, as you said, powered by State Farm. And again, he and his staff, it's not a hard sell. They're just going to tell you the options that they can offer you. And if they're as good or competitive with other people and you want to do business with another Nole, go check out Russ Voorhis.
Now it's time for Florida State's top 40. And, look at this. Thank you very much, Luis Panama Nole. He's been a member on the channel for 2 months now. We got a notification for that. Happy 2 months, my man. Thank you very much for supporting us.
Welcome, Luis.
So here we go with the top 40, Ira, 40 through 36. I'm going to give you the option here of how you want to lead because we don't want to reveal everything. We're not going to break this all the way down. This is what it looks like on the front page. Actually, once you click through the front page of warchant.com, Ira lays it all out. All of us staff members submit our list to Gene Williams. He goes into the back room behind the curtain, and he dials up all of his calculations, and then we get a list of a top 40 all the way down to number 1 for Florida State each and every year. We don't want to revisit 2024 anymore. That was a tough year. This year is also particularly difficult, Ira, because you got 2 new coordinators, one on each side of the football. What was this process like for you, and how much do you wish to reveal on the Monday Smash from numbers 40 through 36 on the list?
I think we go the whole 40 to 36. They can't get the full breakdown, the written breakdown, but I think we can go through them. But yeah, I think what really stuck out to me were 2 things. One, I was very glad to go back and read last year's. Because at the beginning I said this was the hardest process we had ever had because there were so many new pieces. It was going to be a whole new starting team. And while the coordinators were still in place, there were so many new starters on both sides of the ball that was really going to be hard to evaluate. And I think that turned out to be prophetic because we were totally wrong about how that season was going to pan out. But, this one is different but tricky as well. I do think one of the things that I think you'll see as people go through this list is as you go further in the list, some of the transfers, there's more data to go by. Like last year, a lot of the transfers, we were kind of going by recruiting ranks coming out of high school. Jalen Brown, Marvin Jones Jr., a lot of those guys had big names coming out of high school, Malik Benson or junior college, but maybe hadn't done a whole lot at the Power 5 level. As you'll see as this list goes on, a lot of these transfers this year do have proven track records. Now it may be at USC, it may be at Tennessee, it may be at Western Kentucky. It's at a bunch of different schools, but there is more data to go by. But down here in the bottom tier of the top 40, and again, there's going to be 105 scholarship football players this fall. So these 40 ostensibly are your most important 40 players we believe going into the season. So these guys are probably going to be on the 2 deep. Maybe fringe 2 deep, not necessarily put players we expect to be starters, but they'll be key players. But it's tricky because a lot of these guys, there's a variable of play, like whether or not maybe it's a new coordinator, how are they going to fit in the system? Maybe they're coming back from an injury. Maybe they've been dealing with an injury. So all of these guys, I think from like the low 30s to 40, you're going to see a lot of guys that could be huge parts of this team or really big parts of this team, or maybe not as much at all because they're kind of in that there's a variable at play that really could determine whether or not which way it goes.
Well, an easy example of that is number 40 on the list, and that's Jason Jenkins, defensive lineman for Florida State. The variable, health. If Jason Jenkins were healthy inside the top 20, fair to say,
Yeah.
top 25 at least?
Easily top 25. Easily top 25. And he may end up finishing in the top 20 or 25, but as of, right now, because he did miss the spring, and, he and Mike Norvell have been optimistic about when he's going to be available. They've made it pretty clear they think he's going to play it at some point this season. They have not been super committed or super confirming. They have not been real transparent on when that's going to be. So that's why he checks in at number 40. Some people didn't have him on our list at all, and some had him in the mid 30s.
You and I agreed on this one. We both put him at 40. My logic was take a flyer on it. If he plays for, let's just say, in my own estimation, this is not an official thing. Let's say he played 3 or 4 games. He would be important enough in those 3 or 4 games if he's healthy enough to play that I still think he's a top 40 player. Did you have the same type of logic?
Yeah, 100%. And he also is a guy that, and again, people kind of caught wind of what happened at Tennessee this past spring with their quarterback leaving. They've got some real NIL issues up there. Florida State was able to get Squirrel White and Jason Jenkins, and from what I was told, they didn't want to lose either one of them. And I think if their NIL situation was more stable, and maybe they hadn't, got leveraged with Nico. I can't pronounce his name, but their quarterback who transferred, they maybe they would have had more money to keep a guy like Jason Jenkins. They weren't able to, so he comes to Florida State. If he's healthy, yeah, man, he may start, at least be a huge part of that 2 deep on the defensive line.
At 39 on the list is Conrad Hussey, another variable. This would be new scheme, and then also, it's kind of a put up or shut up type year for Conrad Hussey, I would imagine too. I'm just scanning really quickly. I know I didn't put him in my top 40. Did you have him sneaking in there anywhere?
I think he was on my first cut. Like, I think I bounced back and forth because it's a total wild card, I think, in Conrad Hussey, because if you go back to 2 years ago, I think a lot of people have kind of written him off. I think that's why he didn't make some of our lists. Or if you haven't written him off, you just don't know how it's going to work out for him. Because if you go back to 2 years ago, he came in at 2023, very highly touted, and played a lot on a 2023 team that was one of the best teams in college football as a true freshman. I mean, he had 22 tackles that year. He played a good bit at safety that year and in special teams. Last year should have been a really big year. It didn't happen. I think, obviously, there were a couple of injuries, things going on that kept him out of some games. Also, just from things we observed at practice, I didn't think he and Adam Fuller, the defensive coordinator, were always on the same page. I felt like there was some friction there. And I think now you bring in a new coordinator in Tony White. Well, maybe this gives Conrad Hussey a kind of a new lease on life. He goes back to what we thought he was going to be 2 years ago. But it's hard to say that for sure because he was still limited in the spring with the injuries he dealt with at the end of last season. So we don't know what it's going to look like. So to me, he could end up starting or he could not be part of the 2 deep. I mean, it's impossible to know.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you there. Safety there's access to playing time at safety, whereas at corner, and there'll be a corner name that comes up here shortly, but when they go grab Jeremiah Wilson and you already had them speaking highly about other players that are already on the roster, you're like, well, where are the snaps going to come from? At safety, different story. There could be some time for Conrad Hussey. We'll see. Mekhi Danzy comes in at number 38 on the list. Now, this variable, I don't think it's health so much, Ira. It sounds like whatever kept him out of the nationals at NCAA is not going to prohibit football, but this would just be about finding a proper home for him and a role for him that they can more than just being a gadget player. They might be able to find something extra for him at receiver. Like, how would you sort through the Mekhi Danzy issue?
Yeah, he's another weird one because if it wasn't for his incredible speed, and again, he may not be just the fastest player on this football team, but maybe one of the fastest, maybe the fastest football player in the country. His times, I mean, it's not just what he ran the 400, and people wonder, yes, that is a sprint. If you're running the 400, you're a sprinter. And he's also on FSU's 4x100 relay team, which put up great numbers this year. I mean, he is a sprinter. And if you saw him last year, he only caught the one wheel route. But if you saw him run the ones he ran, I mean, he's flying by everybody. I mean, he's It's like Tecmo Bowl back in the day. He runs at a different speed than everybody else. But the question is, okay, how are they going to use him? Last year, they were not very effective at using him. They did try a few wheel routes. They gave him the ball a couple times out of the backfield. Nothing really, wasn't a main part of the offense. But with Gus Malzahn, if you believe in Gus Malzahn as a guy who's going to find the talent on this team and put them in positions to excel, he could be a big part of this team. I think he can, from watching him in practice, he can catch the football. He's incredibly fast. You'd like to think they're going to find ways to use him. And with his speed, man, he could be a big part of this offense. It's just hard to say exactly because, again, even this spring when Gus Malzahn came in, Mekhi Danzy was a part-time football guy. He ran track a lot. He was out there in football a lot. Or sometimes the fact that he ran track makes you think that he's not a huge part of the offense, or they would have demanded he be in football because football gets to say on that. But I think the talent is there that he certainly could be a big part of this offense.
Yeah, for my ranking, I had Danzy pretty high relative to the staff. I had him at 34. Looks like you had him at 39, which is our own. The whole breakdown with the whole staff is available in the article. Maybe it's special teams that it's also the return game is a home for him. I mean, you can flip the field. Last year, Sam Singleton won special teams player of the week for Florida State for a kick return that he had. Well, Singleton's fast. Mekhi Danzy is something else. And you get a couple of big special teams plays for the year, maybe a few bomb touchdowns. Because you isolate him on a wheel or whatever it is. I think that's enough to be a top 40 player, and I think that's probably why we both have him in the top.
Yeah, and honestly, he could be much more than that. Again, I think from everything I've heard from Gus Malzahn, talking to him individually, talking to him in a group setting, listening to him speak at that Orlando coaches clinic, he is very, very much a players, not plays guy. He's very much and if you look at his system, you can tell that it's not a very overly complicated passing scheme. It's basically, I'm going to get my guys who are better than your guys at certain positions, and I'm going to wear you out in those situations. There's just not going to be many people that can, because even, again, going back to Danzy last year, remember when they ran those wheel routes a few times and they didn't hit him, but every time he came in and ran one, you could tell teams still were not prepared. It's like they were not even acknowledging that, oh, this dude's a different kind of athlete. So I think it's going to take a while for people to catch on, and I think Malzahn will figure out a way to use him.
Next up on the list is kicker Jake Weinberg. Is it hubris that I didn't put him on my list? Everybody else on staff did. I'm the one guy who didn't have Jake Weinberg on the list. Could you guess why I did it? Or do you think that, Tom, it's a kicker and Florida State's going to be in some close games this year? They're going to need the kicker, so get it together. What say you?
Did Jeff have him in?
He did.
Because Jeff was he was reluctant to put, back in the day, he was reluctant to put really, I remember arguing with him about Roberto Aguayo, about being in the top 40. He's a kicker, he's a punter. But now these days, all of a sudden, Jeff's going to put him in the top 40. I think, some people are enamored by the leg strength. Jeff and Corey were wowed when we went to that scrimmage, seeing his leg strength. It is impressive, man. The dude, he's kicking 60-yarders like they're chip shots. So he's got a cannon for a leg. I don't know that he's going to be, I'm sure he's not going to be as accurate as Ryan Fitzgerald was these last couple of years. I put him in, just felt like, okay, he's a starter. Again, I gave Jeff all that grief, all those years ago about not putting kickers in when, they are valuable. So I put him in, but I'm not predicting that he's going to be great as a redshirt freshman. What was your thought?
So real quick, Jeff had him at 35, which I'm like, whoa, okay. Yeah. Yes.
I do think he thinks his leg is a huge weapon.
Here's my problem. You had a guy with a huge weapon for a leg last year, and he didn't use him, not nearly enough. So I get that this kid's leg is stronger. I'm not saying that Fitzy could go from 60 plus like Weinberg potentially could, especially I'm hoping for a situation, Ira, where it's kind of like Dublin. There's 2 seconds left on the clock. Florida State gets to maybe their own 49. So now you're talking about like a giant distance kick and the weather's just right. And let's see what can happen. That's awesome theater. But, Norvell philosophically has to show to me that he would be willing to, on a 4th and 3 from the 40, kick in that situation rather than go for it, because you're reducing the impact of the player at that point. Also, the propensity for him to miss And when he misses, they're spectacular. Apparently, just like when he kicks them through from 50 plus, they're spectacular. That scares the hell out of me. I really feel like his first kick of the season is kind of important for his confidence, man.
Well, and you make a great point, because the Norvell is a big part of it, especially when his desire to go for it on fourth downs. And we saw what happened in that 2022 season early in the year, where it was like he did not trust Ryan Fitzgerald at that time, and he made some interesting decisions about whether or not to go for the points or not go for the points. And so, do you go back to that? That goes in a whole different other territories. I'm still really curious to see how the decisions go between Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell in those moments, because Gus Malzahn's been making the final call for 15 years. Mike Norvell's been doing his, the last, 2 jobs he's had. And if it's 4th and 2 and you're in field goal range or long field goal range, and Gus may love a play, and, Mike maybe wanting to go with the urge to, that all is going to be interesting. But no, you make a great point. If he's concerned at all about Weinberg's accuracy, that definitely can minimize the number of attempts he gets.
All right. And now coming in at 36, last one on the list. This is a whoa for me. Let's see if it's a whoa for you. It's Charles Lester. Oh, man. Now, given the recruiting ranking, that is one sexy number 36 there, discussion point that Charles Lester could climb into from obscurity, at least in the early part of his career. Not throwing anything negative his way. It's just that would be something if Charles Lester turns out by the end of the season to be one of the most impactful corners on Florida State's roster, because Ira, he's a corner all the way. Gene Williams had him in the top 20. Well, I will divulge that. That's what got this guy into the list as high as it did. Your thoughts on Charles Lester and the chances that he could be a top 40 player for Florida State this year?
Yeah, Gene was bullish on Charles Lester, which is cool. I mean, he's talented. There's no doubt he's got talent. And if you watch practices last season, he only played in 4 games. He kept his red shirt. He didn't play a ton when he did play. But in practice, he played really well. I thought he wasn't usually going up against the starting wide receivers. But I thought he looked good. I mean, he definitely looked like he belonged. He's long and athletic. He's a guy, he ran a lot with the ones in the spring. The question is, you already have, some players that you probably feel like are going to be ahead of him. Jabril Rawls, Quindarius Jones, those guys were part of the 2 deep last year. They were the first guys off the bench last year. They're both older than Charles Lester, so they got that playing time where he didn't last year. Then you also bring in Jeremiah Wilson, the transfer from Houston. And that, to me, that it's obviously that, Jeremiah Wilson's going to take one of the starting jobs at corner. So now you basically have 3 guys battling for that other corner spot. Edwin Joseph's almost certainly going to be the nickel corner based on what we've seen over the last year or so. So, it's just the question is, who wins that battle? Can Charles Lester beat out a Jabril Rawls or a Quindarius Jones, or is he third on the depth chart? Because there's not a guarantee he's going to be in the 2 deep. He may be. I think there's a good chance he will be in the 2 deep, but I don't think it's a sure thing. Now, the one thing we do know about this defense that Tony White's going to be implementing, it is going to be kind of back end heavy, and there's probably going to be a lot of guys seeing a lot of snaps. So I think he'll be part of the defense. But I feel like 36, you're kind of inching close to high second team reps. Feels like a little high, but prove us wrong, Charles.
Yeah, 36 would be like, I notice you every game. I go, okay. Right. Now, if that happens, then Gene, I think Jeff has already agreed to buy Gene a Charles Lester jersey if Charles Lester turns into that type of player. But you're right, that the signal of the Jeremiah Wilson acquisition out of the portal tells you a lot about what the coaches thought about the cornerback room, and they needed a little bit more security at that point. I'm going to let you stick up before we sign off for tonight, because we have Michael Langston coming up next, and we're discussing right here on the Smash, same link. We're discussing the commitment that Florida State got today. We're recapping a weekend that was extremely busy for Florida State official visits, and then also it bleeds over. There are in-week visits going on right now. Top flight receivers, defensive linemen, and of course Jaden O'Neal, the quarterback, on campus. He's an OU commit, but very interested in Florida State. So we're breaking all that down momentarily. But I want to give you a chance to stand up for your guy, Jacob Rizzi, because Jacob Rizzi did not make the cut. I see, yes, your eyes lit up there. You have Jacob Rizzi in a very lofty position. Nobody else had him ranked. It was close for me. He just barely missed the cut for me. but nobody else is thinking about him like you're thinking about him. Why is everybody wrong about Jacob Rizzi, and why are you right about Jacob Rizzi?
It's funny to me you noticed that, because I was surprised nobody else voted for him at all. To me, I think two things. One is, I really think that group on the interior of the offensive line, I think there's a lot of options there. And the fact that he can play center, he can play guard, he can play tackle. He played tackle at Harvard. So I think his ability to man all the different spots on the offensive line, and the fact that he's got a new position coach. I think there are certain players on this team who are going to really benefit from having new position coaches and maybe new coordinators. I think there's some players who probably not going to benefit from having these new coordinators. And to me, Rizzi's a guy I have a feeling is going to really do well with Herb Hand. We didn't get to see a great amount of it in the spring. He was a little bit dinged up. He missed some time. So we'll see what it looks like in the fall. But I think when he played, he didn't get, and the reason I say that with a change of position coach is Alex Atkins he wouldn't give him at bats. Like, Rizzi didn't play much at all for the first half of the season. Then when he had to play him, he did. And I didn't think he was bad. I thought he played decently. And I also thought, and on a bad offensive line, I thought he played pretty well. If you look at the PFF grades, they say the same thing. And I think a fresh set of eyes on him is going to be good for him. I think he's got a chance to compete. I don't know that he's going to win a guard job. I mean, I still think Richie Leonard's probably the odds-on favorite to win that as the returning guard. That one spot we're kind of wondering about, but I would not be surprised at all if Jacob Rizzi plays a good bit this season. But yeah, man, I'm the lone wolf. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I was a little heartbroken when I looked at the list and didn't see anybody else giving him a nod.
Just understand, everybody, full-fledged, full flight for Jacob Rizzi. If he's good this year, Ira will be celebrating and not letting anybody hear the end of it. He has him at 26 on his list. Nobody else has him in the top 40. So that is shooting your shot. Anything that either stood out to you from guys who missed the cut, Ira, or anything else you'd like to promote coming up on the site this week?
Yeah, no, just a lot more recruiting coverage, as you mentioned. And I know Michael's going to talk to you about that in a second, but there's visits. It's not just we've had the big official visit weekends. This is a big one right now for unofficial or for midweek official visits. And then, we'll be having these top 40 things. I also have two other pieces that are coming up. I think I'm going to have one of them tomorrow on actually Gus Malzahn. I actually went over and talked to Gus Malzahn. Did an interview with him last week, and I've got a story about what Malzahn, kind of going back a little bit more into his decision to come to Florida State, why he took this job, why he decided to leave a head coaching job at UCF. We talk about that some. We talk about how his role is evolving with Mike Norvell as the play caller and kind of juggling those two viewpoints. And I think I'm going to have that story up on the site tomorrow. Now I put myself under the gun. I need to have that story up on the website tomorrow. And it'll be for subscribers only. So if you haven't started your membership, you need to pay the $1 to get the free trial. And you can read that story at Warchant tomorrow. It's
a busy-ass week, everybody. There's a lot of recruiting going on. Like Ira said, midweek visits. I couldn't think of the term. Midweek visits, weekend visits, because the dead period's coming up. Also, that Sunday/Monday for intel coming out of all OVs is an important time for recruiting information. But then also, yes, everything we have team-wise, the piece on Gus Malzahn, all coming in the next week. $1. You also get to poke about, see on all the forums, the largest FSU fan community in the business. So get to hang out with your fellow Noles, just like you do right here if you're watching right now in the chats or in the comments section. I want to say thank you.
If you're an FSU student, right, you still get the
Oh, it's absolutely free. You get, yes, absolutely. 100% free, no credit card required. That's how much we want to say welcome to you as a Florida State student. If you're a member of the Seminole Nation now, the fan base, welcome to Tallahassee. We know that you have a lot of bills either right now or with your student loans after you get out of college. So let's start you off on the right foot with a free membership. The easiest way to sign up is to email from your Florida State accounts. If you're listening on the podcast, just commit this to memory. If you're watching right now, email support at warchant.com from your fsu.edu email address, and we will get you all set. It's as simple as that. We don't need your information on credit card or anything like that. So we hope you join us at warchant.com. We do want to say thank you to Eddie Booza. Thank you, Eddie. He says he's just here to support. No questions, Your Honors. Well, thank you very much, Eddie. We appreciate the contribution to the program.
Thanks, Eddie. Always good to see you, buddy. Hopefully, we'll see you out there again next softball season.
Stay on the lookout for recruiting information right here on Warchant TV, warchant.com, as well as the top 40 list. We will be expanding on that in the days to come. But right now, in 15 seconds, it'll be a chat with our own Michael Langston breaking down all things recruiting. Ira, as always, good talking to you, man.
Thanks, Tom. Talk soon.
We'll be right back.
Contact Russ Voris for an auto quote today.
Once again, our thanks to Ira Schofel for discussing all of the things in Florida State sports land here on the Smash. Now it's time to talk recruiting. And again, we're in the middle of it right now for Florida State because weekend number 4 of major official visits is on the horizon. Florida State just got done hosting a bunch of kids on campus over the weekend, and there are still some really big names on campus currently at Florida State. Michael Langston, senior recruiting analyst for Warchant.com, is here to break it all down. Michael, I do want to get to the quarterback that's on campus, but commitments, they cut in line. They go first. So tell me about a yes that Florida State just got today in the form of a guy named Tank on the defensive line. That's a good sign.
Yeah, you love the name. James Carrington, James Tank Carrington, visited over the weekend. Really, you could tell like this visit was definitely moving to him, and he's probably one of the last, I think, official visits that they got set up. It wasn't set up till later in the week. He's a guy that is a high 3-star, but I think 4-star is definitely. When I watch his film, that's kind of what I see. But when you watch it, a guy can move really well to edge, but also he's strong enough and big enough to play in the middle if you need him to. Got great size. His frame looks fantastic. And he told us he was down to FSU in Nebraska, and apparently he's just down to FSU. So, he committed today on Monday, and certainly a big commitment because to me that's the most important position, or one of the most important, is getting some guys in the trenches, because we haven't heard a lot about those guys in the trenches especially on the defensive side of the ball. We haven't heard a lot about the edge or even certainly defensive tackle. So to get a guy that can kind of be a mixture of play both, I think is a very attractive thing, and one where this kid was hosted by a lot of different schools. Like Oregon was certainly on him fairly hard, and then visited South Carolina and other places. So I think there's been plenty of schools that certainly have captured his attention. So for FSU to get this one done, I think they're pretty excited about it, and you could kind of see the reaction from Terrence Knighton when that you can kind of see the tea leaves of it coming soon. And so I think this is a guy they're excited about, and they wanted, and they showed that throughout the weekend. I think Tank told me, like, look, Norvell laid it exactly out what the plan was, what they were going to do, and they know that they can play me at edge, or they can play me inside. It doesn't really matter. It's just I'm going to play wherever they need me. And for this to get this done, I think it's significant for FSU and that defensive line recruiting.
Well, this is something that's going to take some getting used to as well, Michael, just because, this defensive front is so multiple that guys are going to be lining up all over the place. Sometimes their body in terms of their weight might suggest that they're always an edge player, but they might be moving inside on certain looks. And then you might have guys that are 285 pounds, 290 pounds that might play on the edge because, again, Tony White is setting things up a little bit differently. But as you just said here, this is a player that can play either way, and Florida State's not trying to keyhole him. They're saying that we're probably going to play you in multiple places.
Right, exactly. And I think it was really just a fit of the system, and really it was about selling him on FSU, because we hadn't heard much about I think he told me last he came to a Duke game 2 years ago, and he nearly committed when he was at that game. I think that was the game with Keon Coleman's crazy catch across the middle, and FSU pulled it out. So I think that game he was like, yeah, I wanted to commit. So you knew you didn't have to worry about if James was sold, as long as they nailed everything with the position and kind of the fit. And once they hit that, you could just tell by the body language from the visit, and even when I interviewed him, that this one looks pretty good as long as they keep the pressure up.
And last thing about James Carrington, Michael, is this is a kid who he'll have a lot of experience playing. Got a lot of different competition by the time he gets to Tallahassee. He's well traveled for a high school student. We're used to kids bouncing around in the transfer portal in college from place to place, but he's racked up a good Sky Miles account in his high school years.
He has. I think he said his original home was Baltimore, then went to Bishop Gorman, which that's one of the best schools in the country. Certainly one that it's well traveled, and he's a guy that has certainly been around of different spots of schools checking him out and him checking different schools out. So it's definitely one that's well traveled and one that's versatile. And I think when you look at this system of what Tony White's going to run, you want the versatility, but you want explosive versatility. And I think this kid certainly, when you watch his tape and this film, he brings that.
Again, we've got some things to look forward to, including kids that are on campus at Florida State, but a lot of high-quality players have come and gone now after visiting this past weekend. What was the sense that you got, Michael, that you're willing to share with everybody about how things went, maybe some of the top names that were on campus this past weekend?
Yeah, I think there's going to be more good news. That's what I think this week or soon. I think there's certainly gonna. I think the vibe is even better than what it was last week, which that's impressive because I thought last week's weekend the buzz was really good, the energy, the excitement, the atmosphere was all really high. I think this weekend, the same thing. I think what I was told. Don't be surprised. There's between 3 to 5 new additions. That was before today. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on. But certainly there's several guys I feel like they made a big splash for. Another defensive lineman, Tico Crittenden, who I love his game. He's kind of a guy that's blown up. He started as a 3-star. Now he's solid 4-star up there. At Georgia, visited Georgia, visited several other places. I've heard that things are trending at least right now pretty darn good as far as FSU with that one. Linebacker Noah Lavallee, brothers Caleb's at FSU. I feel pretty good about that one as well. We already went through the Carrington ball, I think, is Chauncey Kenning, as I hear lightning striking my computer, but as I talk. But Chauncey Kenning, I think that's one that I also feel really strongly about. So overall, nailed it. Nailed. You're nailing positions that I think are places that they want to really address strongly. Whether it's linebacker, whether it's defensive line, and then later this week certainly quarterback. They want to get one, but I think overall, the thing I was looking for is like, okay, I don't want to hear the cliche. It's a great visit and we're having fun, and then they did a good job, and hey, they're up there. You want to see some real movement, and I think this weekend we saw a lot of different situations where there was the move the needle moment for FSU in these official visits.
Yeah, agreed. We'll get to the quarterback, I promise everybody, but I got to stick with. I mean, this kid's basically a 5-star player in Chauncey Kenning. We discussed him last week. If you were watching last week on a Warchant TV, you saw the discussion that Michael and I had about who was coming on campus, and he was the headliner among the really good defensive backs that were coming to Florida State. Michael told you about Chauncey Kenning. Mm-hmm. And now the people get to see these. They don't have to be subscribers, Michael. They know what RPMs are. They know the other side of the aisle with the other place. They have little crystal balls. Like that gets everybody's attention. And so when you see a name like this in Chauncey Kenning and Florida State being tied together, that's a statement. And what can you tell us about that weekend that he's had?
Yeah, it's a national recruit. And there's no other way to sugarcoat that. Georgia and Florida were both heavily on him. Certainly Florida State is. They've been there for a while. Certainly have another guy from Sarasota that's already on the roster, and Charles Lester, that I'm sure helped, as far as during that recruitment. His sister, I think, is going to be attending FSU. That doesn't hurt. So I think overall, I think FSU did the best job pitching Chauncey as the person, not just the elite player. I think they did the best job of connecting with him personally and just have a plan. Their plan is really laid out and detailed, and just call it what it is. When it comes to development, you want a guy like Patrick Surtain that's going to take care of you, that you don't have to worry about, like, or am I going to get developed the right way? The guy's played in the pros, played in college. He knows development. He's coached high school. He knows development in every level that you're playing, and that's a guy that he is extremely comfortable with, and certainly loves Norvell. But it's also the comfort outside of football that it has to be there when you're going to class and you're doing all these things and you're on the campus. You got to feel comfortable where you're at. It's not just about football and and all that stuff. There has to be a comfort level, and I think with FSU, there's always been a comfort level, and certainly that was never more evident this weekend when he brought basically it seemed like his entire family from the pictures I saw, from visit and official visit. But I think overall, I think it would be a massive pickup, and it'll be certainly a top national recruit. And like I said, I like where things stand, going into it seems like decision mode.
So now Florida State and the quarterback position. This has been something that since Brady Smigel left and didn't feel like Gus Malzahn's offense was going to be a great fit, Florida State has been bouncing around to a lot of different places, a lot of different potential names. But one name that was available to Florida State, or at least that you reported on, Michael, when Florida State did not have a quarterback, was Jaden O'Neal. And Jaden O'Neal has found his way. There have been other names from the Houston area, from other parts of the country that have come and they've gone. But Jaden O'Neal is somebody who is now, as we speak here on a Monday night, on campus at Florida State. What can you tell us about what's going on with Florida State and the Signal Callers?
Yeah, there's been a long, drawn-out relationship there with Tony Tokarts and Jaden and Norvell and just in Jaden throughout the process. It wasn't just, hey, he took some unofficial. They've been on him for a good minute, good while. So out of all the guys they were recruiting, I think he's probably the one that they've been recruiting the longest. He's very engaging with FSU. You could sense his excitement when he said, "Hey, Tallahassee, No Nation, I'm on my way." Definitely it was a lot of buzz of just getting on this campus, getting through this visit. I think the key really is just that connection. I think with Gus and the offense, I think if that's very satisfactory and it nails it and it's a move the needle type thing, that's certainly one that I think you have to keep a strong eye on, because I think that it's very possible for FSU to pull it off. But I think that for me is the key of how he feels about the Gus Malzahn offense and the fit, because he's not your natural dual threat running guy all the time. So his comfort level is going to be, I think, will tell a lot. But I think his comfort level with Florida State as a university, that's definitely there. You feel that every time he visits. He's been to FSU already several times in the spring, and then now he's got the official visit. And now they just have to roll out the red carpet, lay it all out, and I mean, my opinion, not let the guy leave unless you get him.
Right.
I think that's kind of where it's at, to be honest. He's a top guy. He likes you. You like him. It's just about you nailing the things that you want on the visit and connecting.
Yeah, so just a refresher for folks that might not know this recruitment inside and out, Michael. He is committed right now to Oklahoma, but Oklahoma is tied to another quarterback in the 2026 class that they're pursuing very heavily, which means that while there is a commitment status for O'Neal, there's a reason why he's in Tallahassee, because Oklahoma isn't 100% committed to him in that way. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's fair. And anytime a quarterback's on your campus and he's committed to another school, to me, he's not really committed, because that's one of the positions that most guys don't do that unless there's they don't feel totally 100% about the situation. Now, I'm not saying he couldn't end up at Oklahoma, but to me, it views as like you're not really committed if you're visiting as far as a quarterback position. So yeah, there's a massive opportunity, and like I said, find a way, whatever you got to do. If he's, I mean, you guys are obviously invested in him, so getting him done and wrapping this up or finishing it off, I think that's a major important need, because they don't have one, and this is the one guy that you spend a lot of value and time in, and so for me it's like you don't let him leave until you get it done.
Now, this is an important part of the calendar here for Florida State recruiting-wise, because the dead period kicks in next week, this weekend / next week. So there's carryover effects. You were telling us about this last time we were on video together. That's not just about Friday to Sunday visits, that kids are coming in during the week. Florida State's trying to get everybody on campus they possibly can before the dead period kicks in. What more can you tell me about players, Michael, that might be on campus now and some of the things that are happening in midweek before we get to the final official visit weekend?
Man, it's the most elite group I think they've had all year. With these 5 and 6 they have in there. My goodness, of the talent. We've already covered. Jaden O'Neal's there. You also have Derek Cooper, 4-star from Chaminade, who's also there. 4-star wide receiver Calvin Russell is there. 4-star defensive lineman James Johnson is there. He's one of the top defensive linemen in the country. From a high talent standpoint, I think this is one of the best, even though it is a midweek visit. And I know people look at that like it's like, I don't know, it's like a downer if you visit during the week instead of on the weekend. But this is a major official visit weekend. They also have Cottrell Webb on campus, a 3-star edge. I think I want to say Keyshawn Elizor. If I mess up his name, I apologize, but he's on campus. That you'll have that, and so there's several. I mean, like I said, it's a loaded group. When you talk about Derek Cooper, Calvin Russell, Jaden O'Neal, and guy like James Johnson, that's some serious elite talent.
What is it that you're looking for, Michael, the midweek here, just to give people a primer? I always like to ask this of you or Ira when you're in a situation like, how do you cover this? Because, how you guys see it is how everybody else is going to at warchant.com. So how are you approaching this week, and what is it laying out like for you?
I think some of these guys shoot your shot. I mean, with James Johnson, Calvin Russell, Derek Cooper, yeah, we know they're not one of the favorites. But they're a team that they're very intrigued by, especially with a guy like Derek Cooper. He's really high on Coach Yak. So really, I want to see kind of the impact of guys that, you're not leading for, but what kind of impact can you make in that recruitment despite you trailing? What kind of surge do I see? That's what I kind of want to see of how they view FSU. I want to see how they view FSU, what the way they talk about them, the way they look at them now after this official visit. Because once you do the official visit, that's just kind of like, that's everything. That's like, okay, this is laying everything on the table. So you really have a viewpoint of what the program is. That's kind of the first thing I'm looking for. And obviously the number one thing is Jaden O'Neal. You want to see that one get done. I don't need to hear like, hey, I'm committing today on, like, let's say he does it tomorrow on June 17th, and he says, hey, I don't need it. You don't want to hear, you need to hear that, but there needs to be feedback and intel following these visits that with Jaden O'Neal that I think FSU feels pretty good about where they stand in the recruitment.
I can tell you too, of course, quarterback's the most important thing, but to me, Michael, just as somebody who's interested in this, and I cover it indirectly. I cut through you. I read your stuff, and sometimes I read it behind the scenes, things like that. So I'm close to it. But from an NIL perspective, like if you're not in front, if you're trailing for some of these kids that you're shooting your shot with, but they leave campus and say, well, Florida State gave me something to think about, that not only tells me that they made a very good pitch, relationships and film and all that kind of stuff, academics, it also means that whatever they told him about how much they would invest in the kid grabbed their attention. And what I'm hoping to see from the outside is just more evidence that Florida State is bringing something to the table, presentation-wise, that will grab a kid's attention, that maybe they don't even land, and maybe they're not leading for him right now. If you've got a 5-star wide receiver on campus, but he says, boy, Florida State really gave me something to think about, that kind of quote to me, Michael, means, oh, they came up on the number, and he didn't think that Florida State had it like that. So that's the kind of thing I'm listening for.
Yeah, you want to hear the stuff that you heard from Xavier Tiller, Now, I don't buy into the, hey, I'm going to shock the world stuff, but it's about the wording he did of how big the impression he made and then how much they value him. Same thing with Jaden O'Neal. You need to see that there needs to be – my two things with Jaden O'Neal is, one, the value, the NIL value, and two, the connection with this Gus Malzahn offense, because he's the guy that's running the ship on offense. If he connects with that, I think you could have some potential good news, but I think those are overall the few things I want to see. But I also want to see just the value, how much value they put on these amount of elite guys that are on campus this weekend. Who are you going to value?
And that's what Florida State will be pitching over the next couple of days for the midweek visitors. We've got you covered all the way through this weekend, which I know that in the recruiting world, everybody who covers that is like, hooray, awesome. This is fun. but it needs to stop. And it stops this weekend, so make sure you get over to warchant.com and check out all the intel. Although, what I should say, and Michael knows this better than anybody, once the visits stop, that is like the key 24 to 48 hour period for intel and all the inside information that's coming. So head over to warchant.com, sign up today. It's only $1 for your first week at warchant.com. Get to know the best behind the scenes, get to be with the largest FSU fan community in the business at Warchant. Michael, anything else you want to promote before we sign off for this evening?
No, we'll have more wrap ups on June 17th. I've already told Tom what day that is. But for those that don't know, it's my birthday, so we're gonna have some wrap ups of all these visits, and I'm gonna have fun out there because I get to do what I love. So I'll be out there and we'll have the latest on that. Probably do a recruiting wrap probably later that night. It's kind of the feeling of what I'm getting from the visits. Certainly, we'll have a lot more different previews coming up. Got a few one thing from the camp that they did yesterday. They had their last individual camp at FSU, so I'll go through a lot of that stuff. By the way, and so there's a lot coming up. We'll certainly preview. We haven't even talked about that last weekend of what they're going to do, which I think it's over 20 guys that are going to be officially visiting. So we're going to get into that later in the week. I know me and Tom will probably do another 2 or 3 of these videos just to talk about things.
Yeah, we'll see if any of them are commit videos as well. So as Michael completes another trip around the sun, let's see if Florida State can complete a trip inside the top 15 in this year's recruiting rankings, and we'll keep you posted here on warchant.com. For Irish O'Fell behind the scenes, for Ben Spicer directing the program, my name's Tom Lang. That's Michael Langston. We thank State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, as always, for sponsoring tonight's program, and we will talk to you next time.